I remember the exact moment I realized something was deeply wrong. I had just gotten my third raise in 4 years. My salary had gone from $41,000 to $63,000. I was earning more than I ever had in my life. And I was sitting at my kitchen table, 3 days before payday, with $11 in my checking account. $11. Not after a crisis. Not after a medical bill or a car accident or some emergency I hadn't planned for. Just after the month. After life. After all the ways money had quietly, steadily, completely slipped through my hands despite the fact that more of it was coming in than ever before. I had told myself for years that money would get easier when I earned more. I had believed that with everything I had. And sitting there in the dark with my banking app open, I had to finally admit something I had been avoiding for a very long time. The problem was never the amount. The problem was me, and a set of habits I had built so slowly, so quietly, that I had never once stopped to look at them. This is the story of how I spent years chasing a number that kept moving. How I earned more and saved less. How I finally understood the thing nobody told me about money and income, and how I stopped running on empty. If that number on your screen has ever felt like a quiet kind of shame, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Heartline Money Stories. New stories every week. Hit the bell so you never miss one. The consequences had been piling up quietly for almost 2 years before I stopped ignoring them. The clearest one, the one I still think about, happened on a Tuesday afternoon in February, about 6 months before my kitchen table moment. I was on the phone with my bank. A customer service representative was explaining, very calmly and professionally, that my savings account had a balance of $42. And that I had been dipping into it repeatedly over the past 3 months to cover overdrafts in my checking. $42. In savings. I was 31 years old. I had been employed continuously since I was 22. I had received 3 salary increases and 2 bonuses over that period. And I had $42 saved. The representative asked if I would like to discuss any of their savings products. I said no thank you. I hung up. I sat in my parked car in the lot outside my office for about 10 minutes before I went inside. I told myself it was a rough patch. That I had just had some big expenses lately. That I would fix it next month when things settled down. That's what I had been telling myself for 2 years. Things never quite settled down. Because the issue wasn't the expenses. It was the architecture of my entire financial life, which had been quietly expanding to swallow every raise I had ever received. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because context matters for this story more than almost any other I could tell. I grew up in a household where money was tight in a specific and patterned way. We were not in crisis. But every purchase had a negotiation behind it. Every need had to justify itself. "We can't afford that right now," was a sentence I heard constantly, and I internalized it completely. So when I got my first job at 22, an entry-level position at a marketing agency, $41,000 a year, something shifted in me that I wasn't prepared for. For the first time in my life, I could say yes. To things that had always been no. To the nicer version. To the experience I had always watched from the outside. And I said yes. Repeatedly. Joyfully. With absolutely no framework for what came next. I rented an apartment that was slightly more than I should have spent. I justified it because I worked hard and deserved a nice place. I leased a car I liked rather than one that was simply practical. I ate out several times a week because I had grown up eating in, and eating out felt like a rival. None of these choices felt irresponsible in isolation. Each one felt like the natural expression of someone who had worked hard and was finally allowed to enjoy it. But together, all at once, without any real plan, they built a lifestyle that sat right at the edge of what I earned. And that edge would follow me, precisely, through every single raise I received. Because I didn't have a money problem. I had a lifestyle problem. And I didn't know the difference yet. I was 25 when I got my first real salary increase. A $7,000 bump, bringing me to $48,000 a year. Almost $600 more per month after tax. I remember feeling genuinely excited. This was it. This was going to be the breathing room I had been waiting for. I was finally going to get ahead. Here is what actually happened to that $600. I moved apartments. Not because I had to, my lease had ended and I chose to upgrade. My new rent was $220 more per month than my old one. I told myself I had earned it. I also started going to a gym with a pool and a sauna and a cafe attached. $94 a month. I had been running outside for free, but this felt like the kind of thing a person earning $48,000 a year should have. And I started getting my nails done every 3 weeks. Not a luxury I'd had before. $65 each time, roughly $22 a month. Total new recurring expenses from that raise, approximately $336 a month. That left about $260 of the raise actually available. And that $260 was absorbed, gradually, unremarkably, into eating out a little more, buying slightly better groceries, upgrading small things here and there. By month 4, the raise was gone. Not spent on one big thing. Just dissolved into a slightly more expensive version of the same life. I didn't notice. I was too busy enjoying the feeling of earning more. I was 27. End of my second full year at a new company. They gave out performance bonuses and mine was $3,000. $3,000. After tax, around $2,100. I had a very clear plan for it. I was going to put $1,000 into savings and use the rest to pay off a credit card I'd been carrying for 8 months. But then my friend group started talking about a trip. A long weekend away, a house rental split between 6 people, flights, spending money. My share would come to about $800. I said yes immediately. I had a bonus. This was the moment for exactly this kind of thing. After the trip deposit, my intention to pay off the credit card felt slightly less urgent. The card had been there for 8 months, another few weeks wouldn't matter. And there was a piece of furniture I had been wanting for my apartment. The bonus felt like permission. By the end of that month, the $2,100 was gone. The credit card balance remained, now with another 2 months of interest added. I had turned a financial opportunity into a spending event. And I had done it so smoothly, so pleasantly, with such a convincing story about deserving and living well, that I hadn't even felt it happen. Looking back, that bonus was the most expensive lesson I never learned. Because I would repeat that exact pattern with every windfall that followed. Every story on Heartline Money Stories is built on moments exactly like that one. Subscribe now and join a community that gets honest about money in ways most people never do. The most significant chapter of this pattern came when I was 29. A new job. A significant jump from $54,000 to $63,000. Almost $8,000 more a year. Around $550 extra per month after tax. I was genuinely proud. I had negotiated it myself. I had walked into a room and made a case for my value and been told yes. And then, almost immediately, I started making decisions that matched the new number. I got a larger apartment in a neighborhood I had always wanted to live in. $400 more per month than my previous rent. I told myself I was investing in my quality of life. I upgraded my car lease when it came up for renewal. An extra $112 per month for a model that was newer and drove better. I told myself it was practical, lower mileage, better reliability. I started buying better wine, better coffee, better everything in the small, incremental, barely noticeable way that accompanies a certain kind of income growth. Within 5 months of the raise, my monthly fixed expenses had increased by just over $500. I had consumed an entire salary increase before it had a chance to become anything. And the most painful part? I felt like I was finally living well. Finally at the level I deserved. Finally free from the financial tightness of my earlier years. I had more money coming in than ever. And I was just as tight as I had always been. I had never noticed the pattern because I was always too focused on the next raise. I thought the next number would finally fix it. It never did. I want to stop the story here and explain what was actually happening. Because I spent years blaming this on a lack of discipline or a failure to budget properly. And those explanations, while not entirely wrong, missed the deeper thing. What I was experiencing has a name. Economists and behavioral psychologists call it lifestyle inflation, sometimes also called lifestyle creep. It describes the very human, very common tendency for spending to rise in direct proportion to income, leaving the gap between what you earn and what you save essentially unchanged regardless of how much your salary grows. And here's what makes it so difficult to see from the inside. Each individual spending decision that constitutes lifestyle inflation is completely reasonable. A nicer apartment when you earn more, reasonable. A more reliable car, reasonable. Eating at better restaurants when you have more room in your budget, reasonable. None of these choices in isolation looks like a mistake. The problem is the pattern they form together. The way they arrive simultaneously with every raise, as if income and expense were magnetically linked. The way the lifestyle expands to meet the income every single time, before the income ever has a chance to build into something. There was also something psychological underneath it that took me longer to name. I had grown up feeling financially behind. Not devastated, just behind. And there was a part of me that had spent my entire adult life trying to feel like I had caught up. Trying to feel like I had arrived at the version of life that other people seemed to already be living. Spending was how I performed arrival. Every upgrade to my apartment, my car, my wardrobe, each one was a quiet declaration. I'm here now. I made it. The tragedy is that you can spend your entire adult life performing arrival and never actually arrive. Because arrival isn't a lifestyle level. It's a financial foundation. And a financial foundation is built by the gap between what you earn and what you spend, not by closing that gap as fast as possible every time it opens. I had been closing the gap before it could become anything. For 7 years. Let me show you the actual numbers. Because I think seeing them is important. Over the 7 years from my first job to my kitchen table moment, my gross salary had grown from $41,000 to $63,000. That's a $22,000 annual increase. Roughly $1,400 extra dollars per month before tax. Around $950 after. If I had kept my spending flat from year one and saved the difference, just saved it, not invested it, not done anything clever with it, I would have had somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000. That is not a fantasy number. That is arithmetic. What I actually had at 31, $42 in savings. A credit card balance of $3,200. A car lease with 18 months remaining. And a monthly budget so tight that 3 days before payday I had $11. But the cost was more than just the savings I didn't build. It was also every opportunity that required a financial foundation I didn't have. When my company offered an employee stock purchase plan, I didn't enroll because I couldn't find the room in my budget. The people who did enroll and held those shares over 5 years roughly doubled their money. When a friend and I talked seriously about starting something together, a small side business that needed about $4,000 to get off the ground, I couldn't do it. I didn't have $4,000. I had never had $4,000 available, despite earning $63,000 a year. When a health issue came up that required a procedure my insurance only partially covered, I put the remaining $1,800 on a credit card and spent the next 8 months paying it off with interest. A financial foundation doesn't just save you money. It keeps every door open. It means that when an opportunity appears, or when life demands something unexpected, you have the capacity to respond rather than just absorb the hit. I had no capacity. I had a lifestyle. And that distinction was costing me far more than I had ever understood. If this is hitting close to home, you are not alone, and the situation is more fixable than it feels right now. Subscribe to Heartline Money Stories. Real stories, honest lessons, every single week. The warning signs were there for years. I want to name them clearly, because I think they are recognizable, and I think if someone had named them to me earlier, I might have woken up sooner. The first was the forward spending habit. Every time a raise was coming, even before it arrived, I would start spending toward it. A new apartment signed before the salary kicked in. A purchase justified by, well, I'm getting a raise next month. A subscription started because I'll have more room soon. I was always spending money I didn't quite have yet, in anticipation of money I expected, which meant the raise was gone before it arrived. And I was always slightly overextended, perpetually waiting for the next number to rescue the current one. The second warning sign was how I talked to myself about saving. I always framed saving as something that would happen with the excess, with whatever was left over after everything else. I'll save what's left at the end of the month. But there was never anything left. Because lifestyle always expands to fill available income when there is no intention placed on the money first. Saving last means saving nothing. I knew this the way you know a fact you've read without ever applying. It had no grip on my actual behavior. The third warning sign was a conversation I had with a coworker when I was 28. She was a few years older than me, same company, similar role. She mentioned offhandedly that she had just passed $50,000 in her investment account. I remember feeling a complicated mix of surprise and something close to envy. I asked her how she had done it. She said, simply, without drama, that she had always paid herself first. The moment her salary hit, a fixed amount went directly to savings and investments before she ever saw it. She had just always done it that way. I told her that was smart. I told myself I would start doing that. I didn't start. I filed it away under good idea someday. And someday never came. But I ignored it. Every time the discomfort of that conversation surfaced, I had a new thing to look forward to, a new purchase that put a temporary ceiling on the feeling. Looking back, that conversation was one of the clearest moments of warning I ever received. And I let it pass. Back to that kitchen table in November. $11. 3 days until payday. $63,000 salary. I had been sitting there for a few minutes, feeling the particular weight of that number, when I did something I had never done before. I opened a spreadsheet, not a budget app, not a template, just a blank spreadsheet, and I started typing in every single monthly expense I had. Line by line. From memory first, then confirmed against my bank statements. Rent. Car payment. Insurance. Utilities. Phone. Gym. Streaming services. There were 4 of them. Subscriptions I had forgotten I had. Subscriptions I hadn't reviewed in over a year. Then I added the softer categories. Restaurants and takeout. Groceries. Coffee. The casual purchases, the candle from the market, the book I impulse bought, the kitchen thing I ordered at 11 p.m. And at the bottom of the column, I put my monthly take-home pay. And I subtracted. The number at the bottom was $93. On a good month, after a full month of my $63,000 salary, I had $93 left. Not for emergencies. Not for savings. Not for investment. Just left. And 3 weeks into every month, that $93 had already been spent on something I couldn't name. I looked at that number for a long time, and something cracked open that had been sealed for 7 years. I had not been failing because I earned too little. I had been failing because I had never once decided what the money was for before I spent it. It had always just gone. Toward comfort, toward appearance, toward the feeling of having arrived. But never toward the future. Never toward safety. Never toward freedom. That spreadsheet was the first honest conversation I had ever had with my own financial life. 2 weeks after the kitchen table night, I called my sister. She was 4 years older than me. We didn't talk about money, not really. Not the honest version. But something had shifted in me, and I was tired of pretending. So I told her. The $11. The $42 in savings. The spreadsheet. The $93 margin on a $63,000 salary. She was quiet for a moment. And then she said something that reframed the entire preceding 7 years of my life. She said, "You've been earning more every year, but you've never kept any of it." It sounds simple, but I want you to sit with it for a second. I had been working for 7 years. I had received 3 raises and multiple bonuses. I had earned, across that whole period, well over $300,000 in gross income. And I had kept almost none of it. Every dollar had been converted into lifestyle, comfort, appearance, experience. Some of it was genuinely good, trips I don't regret, relationships I invested in, moments that mattered. But most of it was noise. Monthly subscriptions to things I barely used. Upgrades that didn't actually change my happiness. Apartments in better neighborhoods where I mostly just slept. My sister asked, "What would you have done differently if you'd known the money would run out before the next raise?" I didn't answer right away. Because the honest answer was, everything. I would have kept my first apartment. I would have driven the practical car. I would have said no to the trip and paid off the credit card. I would have started a retirement account at 23 when I still thought I had decades, and it didn't matter yet. But I had been making decisions as if the raises would keep coming, as if the income would always grow, as if the future version of me would handle it. The future version of me was sitting at a kitchen table with $11 and a spreadsheet. That conversation with my sister was the climax of this story. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because I finally heard the truth without immediately building a story around it that made me feel okay. I let it be true. And that was different. That moment of hearing the truth and actually letting it land, that's what changes everything. Subscribe to Heartline Money Stories and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. The realization that followed over weeks, not days, was layered. The first layer was about the lie I had been telling myself about future money. I had lived my entire adult financial life in a mode I now think of as deferred responsibility. Every decision that should have been made with the money I currently had was instead assigned to the next raise. I'll start saving when I make more. I'll pay off the card when the bonus comes. I'll get serious about this when things are a little more stable. But things are never more stable in the future. They're just different. And the habits you carry into a higher income are the same habits that make the higher income disappear. The second layer was about identity. I had been using my lifestyle to tell a story about myself, to myself and to others. The neighborhood I lived in, the car I drove, the restaurants I went to, these were all chapters in a story about a woman who had made it, who was past the scarcity of her upbringing. And I understand why I needed that story. I genuinely do. Growing up with financial anxiety leaves a mark, and spending your way into a sense of arrival is a completely understandable response to that mark. But the story had cost me the very thing it was trying to prove. Real financial security. Real freedom. The ability to weather a storm or take an opportunity, not the appearance of success, but the actual substance of it. I had been so focused on looking like I had arrived that I had never actually built the place I was trying to arrive at. The third layer was the most liberating. And the strangest. When I went back through my expenses and honestly assessed what had actually made me happy versus what had just maintained the image, the list of genuinely good things was much shorter than the total spend. The trips with people I loved. A few pieces of furniture I still cared about years later. Good meals with good company. The rest, the subscriptions, the upgrades, the slightly better versions of things I had been fine with before, I couldn't tell the difference in my actual daily happiness. I had spent money to feel something and the feeling hadn't lasted, which meant the lifestyle I had been so carefully maintaining wasn't even making me happy. I had been paying for a feeling I wasn't having. Here is what I actually changed. Not theory, the specific things I did. First, I automated savings before I could spend. This was the single most important structural change. The day my salary hit my account, a fixed amount, I started with $200, not heroic but consistent, transferred automatically to a separate savings account at a different bank. One I didn't have an app for. One with one extra step to access. Out of sight, out of reach, out of the lifestyle calculation. This is sometimes called paying yourself first. It sounds like a slogan. It is actually the only system that reliably works for people who spend what they see. You cannot save what you have already spent. You can only save what you never had access to. Second, I froze my lifestyle at the next raise. When my next performance review came and I received an increase, I made a specific and deliberate decision. I did not upgrade anything. Not my apartment. Not my car. Not my subscriptions. I kept every expense exactly where it was and directed the entire new amount into savings and toward my credit card balance. It sounds like deprivation. It wasn't. My life looked identical. What changed was that for the first time, a raise actually built something instead of disappearing. The gap between what I earned and what I spent widened by exactly the amount of the raise. And that gap, that intentional gap, started doing work. Third, I audited every recurring expense once a year. For streaming services. A gym membership I used twice a month. 2 subscription boxes I had forgotten I signed up for. A cloud storage plan that was 3 times the size I needed. In my first annual audit, I found $314 per month of recurring expenses I could either eliminate or reduce without meaningfully affecting my daily life. That is nearly $3,800 a year. Discovered in one focused afternoon. The audit is now a calendar event. Every January. Every expense reviewed. Every subscription justified or canceled. Practical shifts like these are what Heartline Money Stories brings you every single week. Subscribe and never miss a story. Real lessons, real numbers, real people finding their way through. Fourth, I separated my financial goal from my lifestyle identity. This was the softest change and the most necessary one. I had to consciously decouple the story I told about myself from the money I spent to maintain it. Which meant sitting with the uncomfortable question, who am I if I'm not in the nice apartment? Who am I if I drive the practical car? What I found slowly, genuinely, was that the people who actually knew me did not register those things. My relationships were not built on my neighborhood or my car lease. My sense of self, when I got quiet enough to find it, did not live in the subscription box. Releasing the lifestyle identity didn't make me feel smaller. It made me feel less exhausted. And it freed up an enormous amount of money that had previously been assigned to maintaining a feeling. Fifth, I gave every dollar a job before the month started. Not a rigid budget, just an intention. Before the month began, I would look at my income and assign it: savings first, fixed expenses, a realistic and honest amount for flexible spending, and a small buffer for the unexpected. Money with no assignment gets absorbed by lifestyle by default. That is simply what happens. The intention doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to exist before the spending does. It has been 2 years since the $11 night. My salary hasn't changed dramatically. I didn't get a life-changing promotion or a windfall that solved everything. The situation changed because I changed the relationship between my income and my choices. I have an emergency fund that covers 4 months of expenses. My credit card is paid off and carries no balance. I am contributing to a retirement account in a way that will actually mean something in 20 years. And the gap between what I earn and what I spend is no longer accidental. None of that is the result of earning more. I was already earning more. I had been earning more for years. It is the result of stopping, finally, honestly, and asking the question I had been avoiding since my first paycheck. What is this money actually for? Not what do I want right now? Not what feels earned today? But what do I want this money to build over time? Freedom. Options. The ability to say yes to something that matters and no to something that doesn't. The ability to weather the thing I didn't plan for. The ability to not think about $11. If you are earning more than you were, more than you ever have, and you are still running tight every month, I want you to hear something directly. You are not failing. You have not run out of potential. You have simply been operating without a system that captures any of what you earn before life absorbs it. The system doesn't have to be complicated. It just has to exist. And it has to come before the spending, not after it. Start with one thing. Automate one transfer. Audit one expense. Give next month's money a job before it arrives. The number on your paycheck is not your problem. What happens to it, that's the conversation worth having. And you're ready to have it. Otherwise, you wouldn't still be here. Thank you for being here. This story was made for you, and so is every story on Heartline Money Stories. Subscribe, leave a comment, and come back next week. This community is built for exactly where you are right now.